Good morning again. The song that we just sung, "The Lord's My Shepherd," did you pay attention to the words? Doesn't it give you a warm feeling? I'm not going to say a warm, fuzzy feeling. But doesn't it give you a warm feeling? That we are His sheep. And there's a reason He calls us His sheep. Not because we're stupid and we tend to go astray. But He calls us His sheep because He loves us. He cares for us. And that's what that song that we just sang brings out. And in keeping with the theme that Danny has had for the past few weeks, my lesson is entitled, "I Am the Good Shepherd." And we're going to go through John chapter 10. And that is the text we'll be looking at this morning. This passage illustrates Jesus' love and care for His children. This passage illustrates how Jesus cares for us. Shepherding was an obvious metaphor in the Old Testament and in Jesus' time. Everybody would have understood what He was talking about. They all understood this metaphor and this parable because the land of Israel was filled with sheep. And there were many shepherds there. And they knew the work of a shepherd. What a shepherd did every day for his sheep. At night, the sheep would come into the village fold, and every shepherd would bring in his sheep. And they would all come in to the same fold. And then in the morning, the shepherd would come and he would lead his sheep out. And he calls them out. He calls them by name. Every one of his sheep, he calls by name. Isn't that wonderful? The creator of the universe, who names the stars. Scientists don't even know how many there are yet because there are galaxies that they haven't discovered yet. And there are billions of stars. God knows the name of every one of those stars. And yet, He knows our name. Each one of us, He knows your name. The sheep know their master's voice and they follow him. And the sheep will not follow a stranger. While the sheep are in the fold at night, robbers and thieves may try to climb into the fold and fleece the sheep or try and kill them. And so there has to be a guard set at the door to protect the sheep. And the shepherd is committed to protecting the sheep at night and in the fold. And in the morning he comes and he leads them out to green pastures and still waters. Green pastures and still waters. The shepherd is even the door because they have to pass by him to be identified as his own. They will not follow a stranger. They will not follow somebody they do not know. A voice that is unfamiliar, they simply will not follow. Thieves and robbers who try to climb into the fold, but the shepherd is there to provide protection for his sheep. The shepherd leads them. He goes before them. He makes sure that the path that they are on is safe. And then he leads them to a quiet, resting place where there is food, where there is shelter, and where there is water to drink. We know who the shepherd is, because Jesus already gives us an idea when he says in verse 9, I am the door. Shepherds were literally the door to the sheepfold at night. The sheep would go in, and the shepherd would drop his rod before every sheep. And then he would inspect the sheep to make sure that there was nothing wrong with it, that it had not been hurt while it was out grazing in the field. And then when he was satisfied, he would lift his rod and his staff, and he'd let them into the fold. In the morning, he'd come and he'd call them out again and lead them to their pastures. And this is a passage, John chapter 10, 11 to 18. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. He who is a hireling and not a shepherd, who is not the owner of the sheep, beholds the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hireling and is not concerned about the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they shall hear my voice, and they shall become one flock with one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it again. No one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have authority to take it up again. This commandment I received from my Father. There are a whole lot of I am passages in the book of John, and this is just one of them. I am. The tetragrammaton in Hebrew. Does everybody know what the tetragrammaton is? It's the four letters that make up the name of God. Yahweh is a tetragrammaton in Hebrew. It is the ego eimi in Greek. The I am. Jesus says, I am. And by all of these, he's displaying his deity, saying, I am God. I am the same as God. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the door. And I am the good shepherd. All affirmations of his deity are bound up in the statement, I am. Here, he is the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. And he repeats it immediately, and he says, the good shepherd. And this is important to understand. Because Jesus says, I am the shepherd. I am the good shepherd. There are two words in Greek to describe good. The first one is of morally good. And the second one has a meaning far beyond than a sense of just being morally good. It's a much more encompassing word. It means to be beautiful, magnificent, winsome, attractive, lovely, to be excellent on all levels. And Jesus says, in those terms, I am the good shepherd. Not only in character, but in all aspects of my being. I am the shepherd, the excellent one. I am the shepherd, the lovely one. I am the shepherd, the beautiful one. He's not just another shepherd. He is the shepherd. He is the preeminently excellent one, the chief shepherd. He's above all other shepherds. And the Jews had an idea of who a good shepherd was. To them, a good shepherd was who? It was David. To them, David was a good shepherd. David who slew and killed Goliath. David who became king of Israel. To the Jews, David was a good shepherd. Jesus is above David. You remember in chapter 5, Jesus claims to be greater than Moses. In chapter 8, Jesus claims to be greater than Abraham, when he says, before Abraham was, I am. And now, here he is a shepherd, greater than even David. Three things we're going to look at shortly this morning, and I hope that everyone's comfortable because this is going to take a while. The first one is he dies for them. The second one is he loves them. And the third one is he unites them. He dies for them, he loves them, and he unites them. Back in verse 11, the shepherd, the good one, lays down his life for his sheep. And I don't know how much you know about shepherding in the Old Testament, but a shepherd was ultimately responsible for the sheep. If anything happened to that sheep, the shepherd would have to explain what happened to it. To them, it was a serious business. To them, it was a man's job. But it was also a lowly, humble, dirty job. It was unskilled and it was highly risky because of the dangers of wild animals. If anything happened to the sheep, the shepherd would have to produce proof that whatever happened to that sheep was not because of him, because of his dereliction of duty, or letting a friend come in and take a sheep. He had to prove what happened to the sheep. David tells Saul, back in 1 Samuel 17, that while he was keeping his father's sheep, he fought off a lion and he had to fight off a bear. In Isaiah 31, Isaiah speaks of the crowds calling the shepherds out to defend the sheep against a lion. The law actually laid it down. In Exodus 22:13, if the sheep is torn to pieces, then let him bring a piece for a witness. It was laid down in the Old Testament law. That is how responsible a shepherd was for his sheep. And for a shepherd then, it was the most natural thing to risk his life for the sheep. I suppose the shepherd could have just have taken his sheep out to the field and left them there. But yet he stayed there. Those long, weary hours, those long hours in the sun, he spent with the sheep. Why? For protection. In case one of them was smart enough to fall in the water and drown, in case a lion or a bear came and wanted to take one of the sheep. The shepherd was the protector. And the shepherd never hesitated to lay down his life if it was necessary in order to protect the sheep. It was voluntary. He didn't have to do it. Nobody forced him to become a shepherd. He did it out of his own free will. And that's why Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I lay down my life for the sheep. In verse 18 he says, no one has taken it away from me, but I lay it down on my own initiative. I have authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to take it up again. It was for the benefit of the sheep that the shepherd stayed in the field with his sheep, protecting them. And it is for our benefit that Jesus died for us. The word in the original language means he died on behalf of us. So instead of us having to die and pay the penalty, Jesus paid the penalty on our behalf. That's a good shepherd. That's what a good shepherd does. And from a natural standpoint, if something happened to the shepherd, the sheep would be at risk. If the shepherd was killed, then there'd be nothing left to protect them. And they would be vulnerable to wild animals. Whether it was an animal or a robber or a thief, it could mean the end of the sheep. But this shepherd, Jesus, no. He laid down his life voluntarily, and he took his life up again because he had the authority to do so. Were his sheep scattered when he died? Yes, they were. Zechariah prophesied it. He said that the sheep would be scattered. And yet, when Jesus rose from the dead, he gathered his sheep up again. And then he says these words, all that the Father gives me will come to me, and I have lost none of them. Jesus does not lose one sheep. As a shepherd will go out and find the sheep that has wandered away, Jesus will not lose one sheep. Isn't that a beautiful passage? Isn't that a beautiful idea? That Jesus is looking after us. He knows our names, our very names. And He will not let anything happen to us. The shepherd or the owner, and sometimes they're both the same, cares for the sheep. He has developed a relationship with the sheep. They are not only known to Him, they are loved by Him. So the first characteristic of the Good Shepherd is that He gives His life for the sheep. And the second one is He loves His sheep. And this is, of course, the reason why He gives His life. Because He loves His sheep. Verse 14 says, I am the Good Shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Even as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. This explains why He voluntarily laid down His life for us. Because He knows us and He loves us. Now you might very well ask, where do I get the word love from? Because all it says is, I know. But in the word I know, or in the word the verb know, which is repeated 4 times, has the idea, if you go back to the Old Testament, Adam knew his wife, and she bore a son. Okay, that's a euphemism. That is where the word love comes in. It's not a a thing of, and not information. God knows us because He loves us. That is where the word love comes in. He loves His sheep because He knows them. He knows every single thing about us. The Bible tells us that those of us who still have hair, He knows the very number of hair on your head. And if you don't have any, He knew how much hair you had. That is how much God and Jesus loves us. John 3:16, God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son. That is why Jesus died for us. And this leads us to the final aspect of this relationship. He unites the sheep. Verse 16, He says, I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. The Lord is the shepherd. He's the shepherd of Israel. And then He says to them, you are not my only flock. There are sheep which are not of this fold, and I must bring them also. And who is this other flock that He is talking about? The non-Jews, the Gentiles, the nations. Jesus says, I have to bring them into the fold as well. That's why we have the Great Commission. Go into all the world. Make disciples of all the nations. He will bring them into one flock with one shepherd. This is a relationship that Jesus has with His flock. This is a relationship that Jesus has with us. We are His sheep. That is the reason why Jesus laid down His life. For me, for you, for all of us. Because He loves us. And because He wants to unite and has united the Jews and the non-Jews into one flock, with one shepherd, the Good Shepherd. And Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. And that's why Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. Let's stand together as we sing our song in preparation for the Lord's table.